Amen and amen. I was glad when they said to me, "Let us go into the house of the Lord." I bring you greetings from Union Baptist Church in Trenton, New Jersey. I want to extend my thanks to all of you, Pastor Ben, for having me. It's a blessing to be here. I was wandering around the church and just feeling radicalized and comforted by the things I was seeing, the art, the signs of welcome, the demonstrations of who you're about, what you're about, and how you're showing up in this community. So thank you again for having me, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to share a little bit of how God has blessed me and how God's eye has been on me. So as we begin, please join me in a word of prayer. God, this is your house. Your Spirit dreamed this community up. Your Spirit founded this community, and you have brought it to this place, and you will continue to guide it. And I'm grateful to you, God, for the opportunity to share this moment with this community. Now may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O God, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. A couple of months ago, I began to see more and more images and messages from the student movement for Palestine, which was taking form in various encampments and liberated zones on campuses across the country. As I saw videos of students occupying administrative buildings, being arrested and charged, rallying around the clock, I became increasingly convinced that this was where I needed to be. I needed to be involved somehow. I needed to lend my hand and my voice. I didn't want to let this moment pass me by. Here were folks demonstrating what could be and needed to be done to disrupt and hopefully dismantle a genocide. And I became sure that this was an opportunity to pray with my hands and feet. In all, I only visited the Princeton Gaza Solidarity encampment 4 or 5 times. But in that short amount of time, I was deeply impacted by what one member of the community described at a town hall meeting as modeling the kind of world that we want to live in. This encampment truly was a liberated zone, an autonomous area. It was the reclamation of space and the repossession of power that the people of that particular community had ceded to an institution and a construct called Princeton University. It was the repurposing of that space and the redirecting of that power for a much more pressing need than the typical goings-on of any university, and a much more liberating movement than the typical movings and shakings of any university. Each day in the encampment opened its communal routine with a time of care for body and soul, with practices like meditation and yoga. This was followed by teach-ins, times of music making and chanting together, lessons in traditional Palestinian dance, town hall meetings, and much more. Around the encampment, there was a free library filled with radical political literature. There was an art and sign-making station. There was a resource area, a food distribution area, a central area for speeches and talks, and an area for tents for hunger strikers. Now, the goals of many members of the popular university were reform-oriented. Their goals included for the university to disclose where the endowment money of the university was invested in warmongering and war profiteering, to divest from those places, to invest in anti-war efforts, and to establish official connections between Princeton University and Palestinian cultural institutions. Now, for myself, as an anarchist who calls for abolition rather than reform of institutions that are not liberating, I didn't share those particular goals. But the Free University for Gaza was my most profound personal experience of anarchist principles in action. I saw a community come together to reclaim its own space, power, and resources. I saw a community make decisions through people's assemblies. I saw a community disrupt or even fully interrupt their work, their studies, and their lives in order to grind the status quo to a halt and devote themselves fully to the work of solidarity and liberation. I saw huge, comprehensive systems of mutual aid arise quickly to meet the needs of those who had made these choices to come together in this community, putting their regular sources of income and provision at risk. In other words, I saw a glimpse of what it looks like to give to God what is God's and to the emperor the things that are the emperor's. When Jesus gives this teaching that we hear in our text for today, according to Matthew's narrative, he's a day removed from his triumphal entry into Jerusalem, and then some light property destruction in the temple. After 3 years of community organizing in the towns and villages, Jesus has said it's time to bring the movement to the city. After 3 years of healings reversing the effects of empire on the body, after 3 years of teachings reversing the effects of empire on the mind, after 3 years of compassion reversing the effects of empire on the soul, now it is time to bring some of that communal renewal to the central site of the community's occupation and oppression. Jesus has now brought this movement to Jerusalem, this place where the Jewish community has traditionally focused its collective power and resources and culture. And he enters the city on a donkey. He undermines the symbolism of rulership through violence and conquest. He tosses tables in the temple, undermining the symbolism of rulership through spiritual abuse and political puppeteering. Jesus is turning the temple into a popular university, a solidarity encampment, if you will. His community is reclaiming this space, their space, from rulers and repurposing it for communal education, renewal, and liberation. So the next day, Jesus returns to the temple and directs 3 parables against 2 groups of Jewish leaders. One group has responded to Roman imperialism by accommodating it, by assimilating to it, and by perpetuating it by serving as its puppets. The other group has, in their attempt to build up their tradition as a bulwark against empire, they have made their means of survival into an end in itself. They've appropriated the common heritage of the people and developed it into yet another burden, yet another rulership for them to suffer under. And there's a third group here present as well. Jesus is giving these parables in the hearing of the common people who follow a popular tradition, which by this point is well distinguished from the elite tradition. It's a village tradition cultivated through oral transmission. It's a tradition informed by memories of liberating heroes such as David and Elijah. It's a tradition guided by Mosaic covenantal practices such as the sabbatical cancellation of debts, mutual economic cooperation, and prohibitions of interest. It's a tradition that's reinvigorated by the liberating theology of the prophets. It's the tradition that Jesus has been re-emphasizing, remixing, remastering, and renewing for the past 3 years. This popular tradition does offer an answer to the question of the moment. It offers its own answer to this question of imperial taxes, as well as the deeper questions that lie underneath it. Jesus is about to remind the people of that answer from their tradition in his typically fresh yet familiar, fulfill, not abolish the law kind of way. So we have these 3 groups present. And when the accommodationists and the elite traditionalists step up to Jesus and ask him this question, is it lawful to pay taxes to the emperor? What they're doing is they're hoping to play Jesus off of each other. They both have their answer to the question that they feel inside, but neither group is brave enough to say that answer out loud, to say that answer with their chest, for fear of the power of those who would disagree with them. The accommodationists, on this hand, think, yes, it is lawful, but they're afraid to say that in front of the people. It's the same fear that leads them to arrest Jesus by stealth at night rather than in broad daylight during the Passover festival. The elite traditionalists, on this hand, who in general deeply resent Rome, they may think, no, it's not lawful, or they may be undecided, but they would rather not say that openly within the hearing of the imperial puppets. But they would love for Jesus to do it and get arrested. But Jesus, for his part, is not primarily concerned with either of these groups. He crafts his answer to the question for the sake of the ordinary folk present. Many of them, I imagine, at least subconsciously recognize that the real question here is not, is it lawful to pay taxes to the emperor? But rather, the question is it God's will? Is it God's will for us to be colonized? Is it God's will for us to be subjugated? Is it God's will for us to be exploited? Is it God's will for us to be impoverished by our oppressors? Is it God's will for them to desecrate our temple and our religion, to crucify our husbands, fathers, and sons, to take most of what we work so hard to produce to support the armies that occupy us. Is all of this God's will? I think many members of all three groups present would, in their heart of hearts, hope that the answer to this question is a clear, unqualified no. But many of these folks may not see how to get there theologically. Isn't God all-powerful? And therefore, is not the current situation in some way God's will? Have we not been taught that when we are subjugated by foreign peoples, it is our punishment for violating God's will? So they hope for a no. But in the absence of a path to get there or an experiential way to confirm that no, they have arrived at other answers to the question. They seek God, but perhaps like the psalmist, their eyes have failed from looking for their God. The accommodationists, not seeing God in their situation, have looked instead to the emperor for survival. The proponents of the elite tradition, not seeing God in their situation, have looked instead to their tradition for survival, consequently making it an end unto itself. And many others simply don't know where to look. When we stop looking for God in our situation, or when our eyes fail from looking for our God in our situation, what we often do is we begin to look for something more reliable, more evident. In the apparent absence of divine meaning, we naturally try to create our own systems of meaning. And when those systems are built on anything other than the recognition of the divine image in one another and the world around us, those systems inevitably come to operate by principles of competition, principles of scarcity, and principles of self-supremacy. And so we go on to create legalities and moralities in the interest of what we see as our own security, our own protection, our own survival, our own provision. And before long, those systems that we've created bear no image but our own. These meaning systems train us to see people less and less through empathy and compassion, and more according to these ideas of right and wrong that we have contrived. We look at people, and instead of asking, whose image is this? We ask, are they good or bad? Are they right or wrong? Are they enemy or friend? Before we know it, we're no longer looking for the image of God in others. We're looking for our own. Jesus, in this moment and throughout his entire ministry, sees this and is seeking to interrupt this dynamic, this mode of being, this form of relating. So he says, show me the coin used for the tax. Whose image is this? The translation we heard earlier says, whose head is this? Whose image is this? He knows that the question that we're all really asking isn't, is this or that lawful or unlawful? The question is, whose image is this? Whose meaning system provides our best shot at life? Whose image are we going to stamp on the ways of giving and getting what we need, our ways of living together in community? The head on the coin, the image on the coin represents one way of seeking our best shot at life. It represents agreeing to the premises of the powerful, the constructs of the conquerors, the meaning system of Mammon and Moloch, and hoping that those gods accept our worship and in return provide us what we need to survive. If they hold our best hope for life, then sure, we should give them all that we have. Give to the emperor what is the emperor's. All emperors, all rulers set out this golden calf before us, and they say to us, this is your God, O Israel, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt. This is who provides your protection, your security, your well-being. So revere their image. Sacrifice to them. Cede your power, your resources, your time, your energy to them if you want them to continue providing for you. If we accept these demands, then we give them what is theirs. But there is another image that might represent our best shot at life. It's an image that is often hard to see directly, but it's an image whose likeness is reflected in every single person that we encounter. And if those persons are gods, and if they bear the image of God, then our best shot at living divine lives, our best shot at divine abundance is through recognizing the divine image in one another. Regarding one another through the empathy that follows from the divinity that we see in each other. Building societies that support us in relating to one another through solidarity and generosity. Treating the divine image as the symbol and reminder of how we get and give all that we need. So whenever we need something, what Jesus is saying here is that we should not be invoking the head of the emperor. We should not be invoking the image of any state, any system built on the denial of the image of God in others, any society built on judgment, any morality enforced by authority. We should be invoking the image of God, because we can never all get what we need through systems built on distrust or disregard of one another. We can only all get what we need through systems built on the recognition, the affirmation, and the celebration of the image of God in one another. So let's give to the emperor the things that are the emperor's, the things that the state represents and perpetuates. Let's give to the emperor our fear. Give to the emperor our scarcity. Give to the state our self-supremacy, our disillusionment, our assimilation, our accommodation, our distrust, our judgment, our restitution and retribution, our competition, our accumulation, our getting at others' expense, our states with their monopolies on violence and their inherent enmity-making machines and their wars and their genocides. Give to the emperor the United States of America. Give to the emperor everything that goes with it. Give the idea of the state to the rulers. Give the idea of property to the capitalists. Create a community where money is useless, where self-interest is self-defeating, where authority is absurd, where competition is ridiculous. And let's give to God the things that are God's. Let's give to God our hope, our wholeness, our relationships, our goodness, our compassion, our empathy, our solidarity, our generosity, our love. Each person's divine imprint, divine belovedness, divine indwelling, divine destiny. Let's give all these things to God, and most importantly, let's give each other to God. If you're like me, maybe you're at the gym and you start to see someone through the lens of body image. And in that moment, we can ask ourselves, whose image is this? God's image. They're a child of God. When we feel disrespected by someone and we start to respond either by internalizing shame towards ourselves or externalizing judgment towards them, we would do well to ask, whose image is this? God's image. And if they're a child of God, that means that somewhere here there are genuine feelings and needs at play. And the way to move forward is to empathize with my own humanity and with theirs. When we interact with a stranger and start to get ahead of any rejection or alienation we may experience from them by preemptively isolating ourselves from them, whose image is this? When we look at anyone and start to judge them as good or bad, better or worse, worthy or unworthy, deserving or undeserving, attractive or unattractive, capable or incapable, profound or superficial, captivating or uninteresting, we can interrupt that instinct and give all of those imperial remnants, relics, and realities to the emperor and give to God the things that are God's. Thanks be to God.